Hello, how is everyone on today? Happy Monday to you. Good afternoon. I have quite a few stories to share with you. Now, I've been talking about a lot of African American people that have spent several years behind bars for crimes that they did not commit. And so this woman, her name is Joyce Watkins, and she was exonerated after 34 years. Now, she served 27 years behind bars, and it says in 1988, Joyce Watkins and her boyfriend, Charlie Dunn, were wrongly convicted of a terrible crime. The mother of Watkins' 4-year-old great niece, Brandy. Although the assistant medical examiner had made a critical mistake in their report, Watkins and Dunn's appeals were all denied. Now, more than 3 decades later, an unusual partnership of prosecutors and defense attorneys has brought about what the 74-year-old Watkins has long prayed for, exoneration. And this is coming from CBS News. And what I want to share with you is that the Innocent Project there had gotten involved also to help her get exonerated. And then she was able to help her boyfriend, even though he died in prison, they were able to help clear his name as well. And so she's going to be on her road to trying to get, some type of compensation for spending all that time behind bars. They also lost a lot. They lost everything when they were wrongly convicted. And the killer of the young woman or the girl at that time, her niece, is still on the run. They don't know, on the run. They're out there, whatever's going on, but they are still out there and have never been, the little girl's killer has never been found. And I just find that so a miscarriage of justice when they continue to overlook evidence, and they have the evidence that shows, or the lack of evidence that you know lack of evidence, but then they still go ahead and prosecute, and a jury comes back and finds people guilty when they're truly innocent. And so we know that there's a lot of revisions and mandates that need to be that need to happen in our judicial system to keep this from happening, because spending 27 some years behind bars and still having to, even after you are innocent, once they determine you're innocent, it still takes time for you to get out. And so I think it's a sad day in our judicial system, in American judicial system, that this continues to happen. Now, on to rapper Archie Eversole, allegedly killed by his own brother at a gas station. So the police allege that Archie Eversole's own brother, Alexander Kraus, shot him at a DeKalb County gas station. And so the beloved Georgia rapper Archie Eversole, he's died after allegedly being shot. The 37-year-old artist, best known for his 2002 song, We Ready. And he was shot on March 25th at a Chevron gas station in DeKalb County, according to a statement provided to Oxygen.com. And and so when the officers arrived, they found Eversole suffered from a gunshot wound. He was transported to a local hospital, but he died as a result of his injuries on April 3rd. And they believe that he was shot by his own brother, Alexander Kraus. And they arrested him at the gas station without incident on the night of the shooting. He was booked on aggravated assault charge, but that got upgraded to a murder charge after his sibling died. It's not clear if he has, legal representation at this time. Now, Eversole, his song "We Ready," it was also featured with Bubba Sparks. You all might know who that is. Was the anthem of Atlanta's professional soccer team, Atlanta United, who paid tribute to the slain rapper on Thursday, stating in addition to his decorated musical career, his voice will long live in our supporters' minds as "We Ready" billows through the speakers for kickoff at Atlanta United matches. The NFL also used the slain artist's music on the soundtrack of a 2019 season kickoff campaign, Billboard reports, and Eversole had two albums make it onto Billboard's charts. The outlet notes Ride With Me, which reached number 85 on top R&B hip-hop albums, and Ride With Me Dirty South Style, which reached number 16 on top R&B hip-hop albums and number 83 on the Billboard 200. So for Archie, rest in peace, and may your family have comfort during this time um, of what's going on, because it's not just your death, but then if it was your own brother that did it, that's even more disheartening. Okay, and then we want to talk about Chris Brown. Chris Brown actually he actually had to call the cops, as they call it. This is from TMZ, because a woman was found outside his home and she keeps returning. Like, what's up with this woman that keeps showing up at Chris Brown's house? So um, he's having this issue with this woman. And, his home is out in the San Fernando Valley. And 2 weeks ago, police were called because she wouldn't leave Chris Brown's home. And by the time the cops arrived, she had skedaddled. You know what that means. She left. So the next 2 days, someone called the cops saying Chris needed a welfare check, but police knew it was BS. The drama didn't stop there. Chris Brown's security called the police again last week because the same woman returned to Chris Brown's home and got into a screaming match with his security. The police ended up taking an incident report because there was no crime, but they wanted to document what went down. And it's important that when you do call the police, a lot of times when a crime isn't committed now, they do not take an actual report, but you can actually ask them to document it so that it's on file. So if you have to call again regarding the same incident, then they have it on file that you've already called. So that gives you a little more, ammunition for them to do something. Because a lot of times, if they don't have a record that you called the police, then it's kind of like you just never called. So it's good to have them to take and document, even if they don't take an actual police report, have them to document that. And so they were told the woman in question had been seen on the street by the Singer's Gate around 10 times. That almost sounds like some situation where, what's that, Jane Doe in the R. Kelly case was outside his house. How many times? Over 30 sometimes or whatever it was, or out there. That almost sounds like that. Keep showing up at somebody's house. So oddly enough, this isn't the first time Chris has unwanted visitors at his home. And there was a time that he had a yard sale at his home a few years back. And they said, wonder if anyone got any crazy ideas when he made his address public. And so the police are keeping an eye out on the situation. So we hope that this woman stays away and just leaves this man alone. But sometimes people try to set folks up. And maybe she is a woman that's out here doing this to try to set him up into some situation. Don't fall for it, Chris. Hold on tight, bro. Don't fall for it. You're doing the right thing and making sure you and your security contact the police, keep them involved, keep them on their toes, make sure it's documented. So if something goes down, you are protected. We have to, when things happen in our lives, we got to learn from those mistakes, because a lot of times people don't learn from mistakes. And so in order to learn, you got to be smarter than your enemy and stay on top of your game. Now, South Carolina death row inmate chooses firing squad. What led to this? Now, I'm wondering if you guys have heard of this before. Out in South Carolina, this is a death row inmate. And I wonder if you heard that they can either choose the firing squad or the electric chair. And so it says a death row inmate in South Carolina set to be executed later this month has chosen to die by firing squad rather than the electric chair. According to court documents filed Friday, Richard Bernard Moore, 57, has spent more than 2 decades on the state's death row after he was convicted of killing a convenience store employee in 1999. A circuit judge has set its execution date for 2002, but prosecutors said at the time they expected years of appeals. Now, 2 decades later, Moore is set to be executed on April 29th, the first person to be put to death in South Carolina since 2011. He's chosen death by firing squad. Now, what led to this? Well, in South Carolina, the inmates can choose how they want to die. Excuse me. So the South Carolina law states death row inmates must choose their method of death 14 days before their execution date. A law passed by the legislature in 2021 makes death by electric chair the default method if an inmate refuses to make a selection. Moore is the first inmate, one of 35 men on the state's death row, to choose how he'll be executed. On Friday, he wrote in a statement filed with the state Supreme Court, I more strongly oppose death by electrocution. Excuse me. Because the department says I must choose between firing squad or electrocution or be executed by electrocution, I will elect firing squad, Moore wrote, and added, I believe this election is forcing me to choose between two unconstitutional methods of execution. Now, why not the lethal injection? Well, lethal injection is the most common form of lethal execution in the United States, with 30 states and the federal government using it as their primary method. according to data from the Death Penalty Information Center, the DPIC, a Washington-based nonprofit. In addition to the 1,363K executions by lethal injection since 1976, the year the Supreme Court confirmed capital punishment is legal under certain circumstances. 163 inmates have been electrocuted, 11 have died in the gas chamber, and 3 were hanged and 3 others were executed by firing squad. Lethal injection often includes 3 drugs: phenobarbital, pancuronium bromide, and potassium chloride. Now, phenobarbital puts pentobarbital. Pentobarbital. It's the 3 drugs. Let me correct that. It's pentobarbital, pancuronium bromide, and potassium chloride. Now, pentobarbital puts the inmates to sleep, and pancuronium bromide paralyzes them before the potassium chloride ultimately stops the heart. 8 states use one drug, a lethal dose of an anesthetic, to execute inmates. In South Carolina, where lethal injection is allowed, the procedure uses 3 drugs. But the state hasn't been able to obtain the drugs needed for years because, according to Corrections Department Director Brian Sterling, manufacturers and pharmacies have refused to help, prompting the state General Assembly to pass the new law last year so executions could start up again. Now, the death by the firing squad, they joined Mississippi, Oklahoma, and Utah in allowing death by firing squad. The state's corrections agency last month said it had finished developing the proper protocols for executions using that method, in which an inmate is hooded and strapped to a metal chair with restraints before 3 volunteer prison workers fire their rifles at the inmate's heart. Let me tell you something. I would not volunteer to do that. I cannot see myself executing someone by a firing squad or anything. And they said it's volunteer prison workers. So can you imagine? They're using they're using prison workers to fire rifles at an inmate's heart. So it says Moore's death would be the 4th firing squad execution in the United States following Ronnie Lee Gardner's in 2010. Gardner, who was on death row in Utah for the 1984 murder of an attorney, was strapped to a chair in a room at a prison. According to witnesses, a black hood was placed on his head and a small target was placed over his heart before he was executed by a 5-person firing squad. Now, in 2017, Supreme Court Associate Justice Sonia Sotomayor argued that in addition to being near instant, death by shooting may also be comparatively painless. And so there are some comparisons, like other methods of execution are often botched. The DPIC estimates that from 1890 to 2010, 3% have gone awry. Lethal injection has resulted in at least 75 botched executions and electrocution at least 84. In all, there have been at least 276 botched executions, but none by firing squad. In October 2021, John Marion Grant convulsed and vomited as he was executed in Oklahoma after he was given a sedative. In 2018, the state of Alabama tried to execute Doyle Lee Ham, but workers couldn't find a suitable vein to inject the drugs into his body. He ended up with 10 to 12 puncture marks, including 6 in his groin and others that punctured his bladder and penetrated his femoral artery. He died of cancer 4 years later. Now, a barbaric way to die. Moore's attorney continued to appeal his death in both state and federal courts. Lindsey Vann, executive director of Justice 360, who is serving as Moore's attorney, wrote in court papers filed this week, "The electric chair and the firing squad are antiquated. Barbaric methods of execution that virtually all American jurisdictions have left behind." She recently said death by electrocution and firing squad are execution methods that previously were replaced by lethal injection, which is considered more humane. The new state law, she added, makes South Carolina the only state going back to the less humane execution methods. Moore's attorneys have asked the Supreme Court to push back its execution while another court determines if either electrocution or firing squad would violate a state ban on cruel and unusual punishment. Attorneys claim correction officials have not demonstrated that they cannot obtain the drugs needed for lethal injection instead. That is very interesting here, and I want you to leave your comments below on this, because this is very interesting that, that I never have heard of the firing squad before. And if you've heard of that before, please, leave your comments there and let me know, what you know about the firing squad as far as, more than what, in addition to what I've shared with you, because I think this is very interesting that this is happening. And like I said, if I was a prison worker, I certainly wouldn't have volunteered to shoot anyone, or especially in their heart. It's just very interesting to, come up, to see things like this that are barbaric, because this is to me actually a barbaric way for someone to die as well. Now, Amina Muaddi, Amina Muaddi, she actually responded, to the Rihanna and the Rocky cheating rumor. Now, she actually says that she's always believed that an unfounded lie spread on social media doesn't deserve any response or clarification, especially one that is so vile. And that's very true. You don't always, if it's a lie, is not true, why entertain it? You don't always have to respond to foolishness. And the thing is, you can't argue with fools. And if you do argue with fools, it just makes you look like a fool as well. So she's saying that is unfounded, and she says that initially assumed that this fake gossip fabricated with such malicious intent would not be taken seriously. However, in the last 24 hours, she says she's been reminded that we live in a society that is so quick to speak on topics, regardless of factual basis, and nothing is off limits. And I know we talked about that a lot, that nothing is off limits when it comes to fabricated stories and stories in general. Nothing is off limit because everybody is proclaiming freedom of speech. And even if it's not factual based, people are still going to speak on it and put their input, their opinion. They even are going to add to stories that are not necessarily true. And it's unfortunate that we live in a society that happens to do that, right? And so she says she felt the need to speak up, given this rumor was not only directed towards her, but two people she has great amount of respect and affection for. So she says, um, let's see, not even, she talks about not even doing what should be one of the most beautiful and celebrated times in one's life. Therefore, I have to speak up, as this is not only directed towards me, but is related to people I have a great amount of respect and affection for, while Ree is continuing to live her serene, best dressed pregnancy life. And I go back to my business. I wish everyone a beautiful Easter weekend. But she, I had already read the part about she believed that an unfounded lie spread on social media doesn't deserve any response or clarification. And so it's unfortunate that people are going to come out and say that, Riri's fiance, has been messing around with her and stuff like that. But, Miladi was someone that joined forces with Rihanna in 2020 for a shoe collaboration with Rihanna's Fenty brand. And the Blockbuster partnership was honored as Collaborator of the Year at the 2020 FN Achievement Awards. Also in 2020, Muaddi teamed up with ASAP Rocky's creative collective, AWGE, on a collection. So in January, Rihanna announced that she was expecting her first child with boyfriend ASAP Rocky. The bad gal set social media timelines and headlines ablaze after new photos showed off her glowing belly. So, people are going to always come out and, tell their story, and people are going to make up stuff because that's what they do. And now we have this student that died while reenacting Jesus' crucifixion on Good Friday. And so this was in a college student in Nigeria collapsed on the ground and died while reenacting Jesus Christ's crucifixion on Good Friday. The audience members reportedly thought it was all a part of the show. Can you imagine that? You go somewhere and you think it's a show and the person actually dies. So it says the deceased, identified as Isul Ambrose, 25, participated in the Passion Play, a dramatic portrayal of Christ's crucifixion, death, and resurrection, organized at the Claretian Institute of Philosophy. The institute is located in Owerri, a coastal city in southeastern Nigeria, 320 miles from Lagos. Ambrose, who was essaying the role of St. Peter, one of Jesus' disciples, unexpectedly collapsed during his performance and began bleeding, according to Punch. A fellow classmate of Ambrose, Mavis, claimed that the former fell to the ground while enacting a gospel scene that depicts Peter cutting a soldier's ear so that Christ's arrest can be prevented. Ambrose was a student at the Claration Institute, training to become a priest in the Catholic Church. Eyewitnesses told the Punch newspaper that initially Ambrose's collapse was thought to be a part of the drama and was ignored as the play carried on. When the young man didn't get up after several minutes and began bleeding, the cast and audience members rushed him to the hospital. Ambrose died at the hospital. At the time the incident occurred, everybody came together and rushed the deceased to a school hospital, and later, when the case became worse, he was taken to a nearly Federal Medical Center, FMC. It was from there we heard he could not survive. The school management, through the priest in charge of students' affairs, Chukwumika Ayin, told Vanguard. It wasn't immediately clear exactly how Ambrose died. All Easter activities at the Institute were called off after the death of the student. The cause of the student's death wasn't released. And then in August 2021, a Zambian pastor died after he asked members of his church to tie him up with chains and bury him underground in an attempt to recreate Jesus Christ's resurrection. James Sakara, the 22-year-old pastor of the Zion Church in Shadiza, asked the members of his congregation to bury him for 3 days. However, when the church members dug up the place 3 days later, Sakara was found dead. He reportedly told his men that it was Jesus who instructed him to do this in remembrance of him instead of simply using wine and bread at Holy Communion. So there's a lot of different stories out here where people are reenacting Jesus Christ, and I understand the passion that's there when you are a believer, but we also have to be, we have to be smart about it reenacting these things. And it's actually kind of sad that that has happened, and he was buried underground or 3 days without air. That can, yes, definitely, when you have air cut off, can definitely asphyxiate you to not be able to survive. And so we talk about Lieutenant Benjamin, Brian Benjamin. He resigned after being arrested. So he is the New York Lieutenant Governor. And so he was arrested and indicted in an alleged bribery scheme. And it says that he did resign. So I figure he resigned it. What did he resign for? He resigned it. He resigned because what? Because he was indicted in an alleged bribery scheme. And so he can't continue to serve as lieutenant governor, said New York Governor Kathy Hochul. And it says that Benjamin was arrested and indicted on charges in connection to an alleged bribery scheme to obtain campaign contributions in exchange for securing a state grant, according to CNN. The 5-count indictment said Benjamin worked to move $50,000 in state funds to a New York real estate developer's charity while he was a state senator. In exchange, the developer decided to move thousands of dollars in illegal campaign contributions to Benjamin's campaign to run for New York City comptroller and his Senate campaign. So they're basically saying it's a simple story of correction. Damian Williams, the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, told reporters Tuesday, taxpayer money for campaign contributions, quid pro quo. This for that, that's bribery, plain and simple. And there's no evidence that Hochul knew about Benjamin's alleged criminal acts since it occurred when he was a state senator, per the New York Times. So, you best believe that they are really starting to look into cracking down, on campaign corruption and things like that. And if you use money that's for something other than what it's intended for, they're definitely going to come for you. And especially if they don't want you in office, that's going to happen too. So people have to be on their P's and Q's to make sure that they're not getting caught up. Now, the AME Church, the African Methodist Episcopal Church. Okay. So basically the pastor, they're suing over missing church funds for retirement. It's the retirement funds that they're suing over. Now, retired pastors have filed at least 2 federal lawsuits in recent weeks against the African Methodist Episcopal Church, along with several subsidiaries and financial firms the church used, alleging tens of thousands of dollars from a pension fund were mismanaged and missing. The retired pastors in Florida and Maryland filed the lawsuits against the oldest historically black denomination in the United States late last month. They are seeking class action status on behalf of thousands of other AME pastors and church officials throughout the U.S. who lost money through the pension fund. So these pastors have paid into this pension fund and they have lost their money because there are people that have taken the money and did different things with it. The pastors, all of whom have worked about a quarter century for the church and were required to participate in the retirement plan. They said they were required to participate in it. And they said they have been unable to get access to their money. And so the lawsuit filed by the Florida pastor, the Reverend Charles Jackson in Orlando, alleges the church and its related financial institutions were negligent and breached their fiduciary responsibilities. Jackson is seeking a jury trial and punitive damages in the complaint filed in federal court in Tennessee. So many class members, including plaintiff Reverend Jackson, are retired and have suddenly learned that resources they relied on to support themselves, to depend on in times of bad health, and to simply enjoy during retirement have been stolen from them by people they trusted. Now, in his lawsuit, the Reverend Cedric Alexander of Bowie, Maryland, said the then chair of the church's retirement fund invested money in undeveloped land in Florida and a now defunct capital venture outfit and gave a promissory note to an installer of solar panels. The lawsuit alleges violations of a federal law protecting employee retirement funds, because you cannot take employees' retirement funds and use them for something like that. You cannot do that. It is protected and it's a federal law in place, and this should not have never happened. But you hear a lot of the pastors are taking money from churches, from congregations. They're stealing money. They're stealing some of the congregate's identity or the church secretary. If they know of an elderly that's been in the church forever, they have even stolen their identity and opened up credit cards in their congregate's names. And it's really sad and it's unfortunate that we are hearing about a lot of pastors mismanaging funds of the church money, because this is money that people are paying their tithes and offerings. And when you don't do audits, that is a big deal when you don't do audits, because you then find out after the fact when the money's gone and you can't recuperate it, or now you see federal charges being brought. That's when people want to start trying to figure things out as far as an audit. But it is best to make sure that audits are done on a regular basis, at least quarterly, like every 3 months, and that it's a spreadsheet up on a screen that tells you, and the members are invited to a business meeting. People are notified that they are welcome to come to those business meetings. They're welcome to vote on things, yes or no, to vote on those things. They are welcome to, give their concerns in an appropriate manner, and things like that, and have a right to know where the church's funds or money is going or what is being used for, and even any projected future projects. What will the money be used for? How much they need to raise if they don't have the money, or if they are interested in raising money for certain things so they don't have to go into, a fund that they're saving for a rainy day. So the church's retirement fund chair invested planned assets in imprudent, extraordinarily risky investments that ultimately lost nearly 100 million of planned participants' retirement savings, the Maryland lawsuit said. That's a lot of money. And you're not supposed to be using money and knowing that it's risky to begin with. And people will do that because it's not their money. If they feel they can get away and steal people's money, they will do that. And so the church didn't immediately respond to an email seeking comment. However, in a message posted to its website late last month, the church acknowledged that retirement fund participants may have been the victim of a financial crime. So after a new administrator of the church's Department of Retirement Services took over last year, financial irregularities were uncovered in some retirement fund investments. The church has hired an outside legal firm and forensics expert to conduct an investigation, the statement said. The AME Church takes financial irregularities and disclosures seriously, and we are committed to the restoration of any impacted retirement funds, the statement said. We are also committed to making every fund participant whole by restoring their full investment plus interest. Jackson 72 told the Associated Press in a phone interview that he feels betrayed. And you know what? A lot of church members that have this happen to them, and even people today that may not have been through something like this, they still feel betrayed. There's a lot of church members that go to church and they feel betrayed when they know that things come up and the pastor is doing things that they find out after the fact. What you do in the dark, so shall come the light. And you have pastors up in the pulpit preaching the holy word and this and that, but then they're living a life that's different from what they're preaching. and people can feel betrayed and lose trust and hope in a church body, even in the pastor, and they walk away from the church, and you wonder why the world, you wonder why things are going on right now, because we have pastors and ministers and priests, and bishops, you have to get back to a right relationship with Christ. I truly believe that a right relationship with Christ. Turn away from your wicked ways and sin. And I'm not saying all pastors and ministers and bishops and stuff like that and priests are doing that, but we see it so often that I do see where a lot of people have walked away from the church and they don't have their trust there because they're not getting what they're supposed to be getting when it comes to the word of God, when it comes to people in the pulpit living lifestyles other than what they are preaching about. And it's hard to tell somebody else how to live their life, even though it's in the word, when you're not living the life that you preach about, that you sing about, that you say that you're doing. And so, therefore, it happens that way. And so, for believers, you have to take responsibility for your own walk with Christ and stuff like that, and really see the signs, the red signs. And if your church isn't you know, doing what's right, you got to speak up. And if you do speak up and they want to kick you out of the church for speaking up, because I've heard that happen too to some church members, then that's not the church for you. And you pray about it and ask God to move you where they are doing the right thing and living out the life that God has called them to. No church is perfect, just like no job is perfect. But you still have to make sure that we are walking upright because the pastor is really close to Christ and he is the shepherd of the church. And so there is no reason why pastors, preachers, bishops, even ministers, there's no reason, or associate pastor, excuse me, or reverence, whatever that they're called. But what I'm saying, because there's a lot of different names, but there's no reason for that, for pastors to be acting out like that. And it says a lot if they are living a life contrary to the word of God. That says a lot about their life, that they really are not in it. And a lot of them are just in it for notoriety. They're putting on an act in the pulpit, and they're definitely taking money that they shouldn't take. They get greedy, they get tempted, by the flesh, and this is what they do. And we have got to speak out about this a lot more. So anyway, it says here that when you take advantage of my money, you lose my trust, Jackson said. You lose the trust of your employees. They lost the trust of a lot of people when it came really down to all of that, because that is really, really wrong to steal people's money. And then Yaya Mayweather. Now, you might have heard that she has pleaded guilty. Remember Yaya? She pleaded guilty to stabbing one of NBA young boys' baby mothers. Now, Mayweather and her legal team reportedly appeared in a Houston courtroom on Wednesday, April 13th, where she pleaded guilty to aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. The daughter of famed boxer Floyd Mayweather Jr. was arrested in 2020 for stabbing LaPatra Lachey Jacobs, the mother of one of NBA young boys' children. According to court documents obtained by the Shade Room, prosecutors are suggesting 6 months of probation for the assault, which could include community service, restitution, or a combination of the two. The 21-year-old is expected back in court on June 16th for sentencing, where she'll learn her fate. Now, she allegedly stabbed Jacobs. They was at, NBA young boy's home, and she was claiming she was young boy's fiance. You remember that? All of that was going on. She was saying she was engaged to him. So she ordered Jacobs to leave. And I think a lot of controversy was that she can't tell that woman to leave. Young boy needs to tell the woman to leave, not her, because it wasn't her home from what was out there. It was NBA young boy's home. So he has a right to have whoever he wants in his house. And if he's going to disrespect someone that's claiming to be engaged, then that means that he doesn't really have any respect for you. So why would you stay there and want to fight another woman if he didn't tell that other woman to leave? Because remember, it's his house and not hers. And so I even thought about that when I read the story, and I was like, wait a minute, if this man is not asking his other woman to leave, that shows how much respect or lack of respect he has. And plus, he has a child by this woman. And so he obviously didn't want her to leave. And so when she refused to leave, Yaya got in an argument ensued, and eventually it went into the kitchen. It moved into the kitchen where Mayweather grabbed two knives. because she wanted the woman to leave, and the woman wasn't leaving because basically she was like, "This is not your house. I don't have to leave unless he tells me to leave," and so she didn't leave. And so as Jacob stepped toward Mayweather, she stepped toward her. She reportedly charged that Jacobs was one of the knives. Now, they're saying that she stepped towards Mayweather and she charged. But if someone's stepping towards you, why would you need to charge them? All you would need to do is probably just swing your arm out. I don't know. I'm not trying to encourage anything. But to say that if she comes towards you, obviously, and you already been arguing, it just seems to me, and I'm not, taking sides, it just seems to me that you are going to try to protect yourself. But anyway, Jacobs was then hit with the second knife and fell to the floor, where she was discovered by EMTs in a pool of blood. She was treated at the hospital and released, while Mayweather was arrested and sent to jail. Now, she and Young Boy have had an on and off again relationship for years. And then she wind up getting pregnant in 2020 of January, and that was his seventh. But guess what? He has since had another baby by another woman. He has 8 children out here. He's a young person doing all of this, having these babies, unprotected sex, and they're not obviously protecting themselves. And women, you have got to protect yourselves unless you are trying to have a baby by this man for whatever reasons that you're doing that. You should protect yourself if you're going to proceed to do that. Mayweather was originally facing up to 20 years in prison for the crime, but it looks like she'll escape with probation if all goes well at the sentencing hearing. So I don't know what to say on that one, but I will run far away from NBA Youngboy because he just would not be part of my life, to be honest with you. He just wouldn't be part of my life, with that going on because you still having babies by other women. I'm getting ready to serve time or probation or whatever it may be. They said probation, and community service, whatever it may be, because I'm trying to stand up because I think I'm in love with you, but yet and still you're not even showing me the same love back. And now, entire Canadian flight crew was jailed. Guess what? A whole entire Canadian flight crew was jailed after they reported that there was a stash of cocaine on the plane they thought was a bomb. Can you imagine? They thought it was a bomb. They called the police, they called the authorities, and guess what? They were jailed. The whole crew, Canadian crew, was detained and imprisoned in the Dominican Republic after they reported a huge stash of cocaine in the plane to police earlier that month. Now, the 5 crew members of the Pivot Airlines discovered and reported contraband found on the aircraft while grounded at the Punta Cana International Airport in the Dominican Republic on the 5th of April. And so the Dominican Republic's National Drug Control Directorate, DNCD, said that 8 packages, each containing 25 smaller packages of cocaine totaling 200 kilograms, were located in the aircraft control compartments after an in-depth search. The local police said the cocaine is worth about $25 million. The charter plane had arrived at Punta Cana Airport on 31st of March and was scheduled to fly to Toronto. Now, the airline said its crew members found the contraband in a maintenance compartment that contained critical electrical gear and reported it to both the local police in the Dominican Republic and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. But when the Dominican police searched the space, they found 7 other similar sacks. Now, Pivot Airlines confirmed in a statement on 6th of April that the crew had been detained in the Dominican Republic, but did not reveal their identities. Those detained included the captain, the first officer, 2 cabin crew, and a maintenance engineer. It said the crew averted a likely air disaster that could have been caused by the extra weight and the flammable packages being close to electrical equipment. Now, the statement also added that it was unacceptable that a Canadian aircrew could remain detained for the duration of a potential 12-month investigation for a suspected crime, they reported. What do you think about that? Now, they reported this crime and then they detained them. That's kind of weird. I wonder, why would they detain them? Did they think it was a setup? Why would you hide some drugs and then turn around and call the authorities on your own self? That's not making sense to me. Well, they do not speak the language, have been identified as reporting the contraband to authorities in fear for their safety. We are deeply concerned for the safety, security, and ethical and humane treatment of our crew that the airline launched out of Toronto Pearson International Airport in 2021. Because they don't speak that language. They're Canadians, so they're not speaking that, the language of the Dominican Republic and nothing like that. And so the airline said the cruise members were being held in separate detention facilities and that the men were inside communal cells with accused drug criminals. I would be kind of leery of that. Now, the Dominican Republic Drugs Agency took a total of 11 people into custody, including the 5 crew members. An extensive investigation progress has been initiated around this case, the local drugs agency said in a statement. The public ministry, assisted by DNCD agents, are working hard to clearly establish who is directly linked to the seizure of the substance. On Tuesday, a Dominican court decided to improve the conditions for crew and outline a process for their eventual release from detention, CTV News reported. Eventual. Eventual to me, I don't know if the eventual could be any time. It could be years from now. You know, it's crazy. So Pivot Airlines said it was grateful for the decision and was working diligently to secure its crew's release. A spokesperson for Global Affairs Canada said they were aware of the situation but didn't provide any further clarification. So I'm just wondering if these people have been let out, because I would definitely not want to be stuck, you know, definitely stuck in a jail cell knowing that I am innocent. Now, you know that there are lawmakers that are worried about Dianne Feinstein. They are worried about Dianne Feinstein being of her, they're concerned about her mental state. She's a senator from California. She's the oldest member of Congress, and at least 4 senators and 3 former staffers claim the 88-year-old memory is rapidly deteriorating. And this is allegedly, and the report isn't the first time Democrats have trained their fire on the veteran senator in recent years. Now, one lawmaker claimed to have had to be reintroduced several times to Feinstein over several hours as they talked policy. The lawmaker also claimed to have spoken with Feinstein about the same small talk topics over several hours without any recognition from Feinstein that she had addressed the topic recently. And he says he's worked with her for a long time and long enough to know what she was like just a few years ago. Always in command, always in charge, on top of the details, basically couldn't resist a conversation where she was driving some bill or some idea. And that is Dianne Feinstein. I've known of her in California for many years as senator. And actually, I have actually reached out to her in the past about different, concerns I had. And she actually, and even bills that have passed, and she actually has responded to me. And so uh, now this lawmaker is saying all of that is gone. She was an intellectual and political force not that long ago, and that's why my encounter with her was so jarring, because there was just no trace of that. Now, they claim that she has memory lapses and she don't appear constant and will shift daily. It says while Feinstein held her composure during the confirmation hearings for Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, who will become a justice, for the Supreme Court this summer, some claim she struggled to recognize her colleagues on other days. But Feinstein dismissed those allegations about her mental state and said she is still performing her job well. Okay. Now, last year has been extremely painful and distracting for me, flying back and forth to visit my dying husband, who passed just a few weeks ago, Feinstein said. But there's no question I'm still serving and delivering for the people of California, and I'll put my record up against anyone. Go ahead, Feinstein. Go ahead, sister girl. So other members of Congress stood up to protect Feinstein, particularly in light of her husband's death on March 4th. So, Miss Feinstein, my condolences go out to you for the death of your husband. May he continue to rest in peace. And I'm sorry to hear that your husband passed away. Now, they said it is unconscionable that just weeks after losing her beloved husband of more than 4 decades, and after decades of outstanding leadership to our city and state, she is being subjected to these ridiculous attacks and are beneath the dignity in which she has led and the esteem in which she is held, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said. Now, Feinstein faced similar accusations of declining mental fitness in the past. Um, and this was the New Yorker published in 2020 of December on rumors that she was struggling, with cognitive decline, and particularly in light of her conduct during the confirmation hearings for Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett. So I just pray that everything will be all well with Dianne Feinstein. Again, I said I've reached out with her in the past, and she has actually responded. And sometimes, like I reached out, and I won't mention the name, her office never responded. And I was like, really? Is that how that's going to be when people reach out to your office? You don't respond? Okay. So anyway, let's go on to Lauren Hill. Lauren Hill She actually is urging California lawmakers to pass a FAIR Act, a bill that would change contract limits for musicians. And so let's get into this right here. In a statement posted to Instagram, Lauryn Hill has urged California lawmakers to pass the FAIR Act, which will overhaul labor law in the state. The act was first introduced by California State Assemblywoman Lorena Gonzalez last year. Its full title is the Free Artists from Industry Restrictions Act and would cap recording contracts for artists based in California or labels based in California at 7 years. The ideal is the bill will further protect musicians as the same protection the bill proposes is already granted to California workers in other fields. Lauryn Hill is one of the biggest proponents of the bill and has shared a lengthy letter urging California lawmakers to pass it. If passed, the law would also offer the same protections to TV and film productions too. We love to believe that businesses at the highest level are always run by fair practices and moral prerogatives. But this is more often than not the case, she wrote. For this reason, laws must exist that protect people from harsh and insensitive practices like artist suppression and willful sabotage and neglect. Record companies are still peopled and run by, well, people with personal policies, biases, and issues we may know nothing about. Artists can easily fall prey to the internal politics of business, someone inside simply not liking them, or bullying and intimidation, and the attacks that come when someone resists that coercion. She also highlighted that greed can often pervert the creative intentions of young dreamers who don't realize they're up against a system with a history of using and crushing people who don't comply with their agenda. Hill would know, as she's spoken at length in the past about the corruption and greed that's rife in the music industry. She says we have a history of examples of albums, of bands, and of people whose influence on popular culture has literally changed the world, she continued. When these voices go silent and repressed, the world is dramatically affected. No institution should be allowed the opportunity to control the market by controlling the output of a creative being for some ridiculous, indefinite period of time. The Recording Industry Association of America and 20 record labels released 3 studies last year in which they claimed the bill could upend the existing creative ecosystem that is producing the largest advances in royalty payments in business history per deadline. Now, Irvin Azoff, founder of the Music Arts Coalition, has said that streaming has dramatically changed how the record industry has worked, but the laws have not been changed to reflect that. Streaming has been an unprecedented bonanza for the record labels, but not so for artists. And as of last year, it is unfair that the only Californians excluded from the protection of the 7 year statute are recording artists. We ask our record label partners and members of the California legislature to join us and support this important initiative. We must protect artists and modernize this archaic law. So if you are in agreement with this, then you can actually find that article. Like I said, I will have this article out here for you to go ahead and you can reach out if you are an artist so that you can get on board with what they are doing in support of that and get on board with that. And then there is just a lot, with these stories. There was a daycare worker who grabbed an infant by the ponytail and threw the child to the ground, causing the ponytail to become detached from the head. She has been indicted, and the daycare's license had been suspended, officially suspended. Now, this is a sad story because, it's hard sometimes to find proper and safe, convenient daycare for your children, and then especially infants, and then it's so expensive to put children, your babies, in daycare. And there has been a lot of increasing number of incidents with daycare workers in the last couple of years. Additionally, makes the parents' decision much more complicated when it comes to choosing the best daycare option for your child. Now, the local community and the parents, this was a 1 year old child, and they were nothing but devastated when they discovered that what the infant had been through in an early March incident when the child was assaulted by a daycare worker or a daycare employee. The inspection in the daycare facility that took place a few days after the incident led to the arrest of the daycare worker on March 19th. Got her license suspended and she was officially charged by the end of the month for dragging this child. So basically what she did is she dragged this child, she pulled the child up by her head, she carried the child across the room by her hair and ripped, and by doing that, it ripped out her hair. And then She tried to hide what happened. And what she did, this was out of Cincinnati, Ohio. What she did is she threw the hair that came out of the child's head in the trash can. So let me read this article to you. It says the Ohio Department of Jobs and Family Services has suspended the license of a Cincinnati daycare where a worker is accused of violently assaulting a 1-year-old. Small Kids Adventures Learning Center in West Price Hill must cease operations at 6 p.m. Tuesday, according to a Cincinnati police spokesperson. The center will remain closed until the investigation is complete and a final determination of its license status is made. This happened on March 3rd, according to Hamilton County Prosecutor Joe Dieter. Now, a daycare worker, Kristen Hemmett, 27, allegedly grabbed the child by the hair, lifted her off the ground, and dragged her across the room. She then allegedly jerked the child back and forth, ripping the hair from her scalp. That's got to be painful, and definitely a 1-year-old. And imagine how painful that would be for us and adults. And even you're doing this to a 1-year-old, which basically is still a baby. So ODJFS commissioned a report on the incident that found the child was grabbed by the ponytail, thrown to the ground, causing the ponytail to become detached from the head. After it, Hemmett tried covering the child's bald spots and threw the hair away in a trash can, Dieter said, citing court records. A Hamilton County grand jury last week indicted him on charges of assault, child endangering, and tampering with evidence. Said Dieters, this is every working parent's worst nightmare. To leave your child at a facility that is responsible for their care and to have this happen is sickening. There is simply no justification for why someone would do this to a 1-year-old baby. The daycare history at ODJFS inspection shows repeated rule violations, including a chronic failure to perform background checks and incomplete record keeping. The daycare has never achieved full compliance in any inspection dating back to October 2019, and every annual inspection since then has found at least 57 instances of rule breaking. An ODJFS inspection in January 2020 was launched up on a complaint that an unidentified daycare staff member had yelled at children and used inappropriate words to redirect behavior, according to the report summary. ODJFS inspected the facility on March 10, 2022, 7 days after the incident allegedly involving Hemmett. Investigators were able to substantiate that a staff member had used cruel, harsh, unusual, or extreme techniques in managing unacceptable behavior in children. They recommended the individual be released from employment immediately. The same inspection found the administrator, child care staff, and or employees of the program did not protect or remove a child from a situation and or person determined to be unsafe, which resulted in a serious incident or injury to a child. Hemmett was arrested March 19th. He remains at the Justice Center on bail totaling $170,000 across her charges. Cincinnati police are still investigating to see if other children were harmed in Hemmett's care. That investigation is ongoing. And then parents who suspect their child might be a victim are urged to call Cincinnati Police Detective McCary or Detective Delt at 513-263-8300. So that's really bad that this has happened. You know, happened to this baby. And so you have to be very careful about where you put your children at. You really do. And you have to show up. You know what? Show up, to show up unannounced. Show up unannounced so that you can see what's going on. Catch them off guard to make sure that they are doing the right thing by your children and even by other children. Because if they're mistreating your child or they're mistreating another child, vice versa, you know what's going to happen. If they do it to another child, they're liable to do it to your child. It's just a matter of time. And so therefore, we have to be very careful about where, we put our children where we put our children at. And we have to be careful, like I said, we have to check our children, make sure everything's going good, ask kids how they're doing. And we know that a 1-year-old can barely talk a lot of times. Some 1-year-olds can speak very well, but they can tell you where it hurt at. A lot of children can tell you that where it hurt somewhere at least at 1 year of age. And they will be crying. So you have to check them out and make sure your kids are okay, because in cases like this, we are seeing an increase of mistreatment and inappropriate, correction of children in these daycare facilities. And so we just need to make sure that we are doing the right thing by our children. And now, last but not least, there was a California failed to stop corrupt lawyers, and Tommy Girardi is a disgraced attorney. And so they're talking about how California has failed to effectively discipline corrupt attorneys, and so for that repeatedly violate professional standards and harm members of the public. And this was an audit that was done by the agency, the state bar agency. And so the audit of the state bar was ordered last year by the legislator in wake of a Los Angeles Times investigation that documented how the now disgraced attorney Tom Girardi cultivated close relationships with the agency and kept an unblemished law license. Now, despite over 100 lawsuits against him or his firm, with many alleging misappropriation of client money. Now, after the state bar acknowledged its mistakes in handling complaints against Girardi that spanned 4 decades, the legislature mandated the public examination of the attorney discipline system. The audit concluded that the state bar failed to properly investigate some attorneys, even as complaints poured in, relied on confidential warning letters and other non-public methods that did little to deter misconduct, and has not dealt with the conflicts of interest between its regulatory staff and the attorneys whom the agency is tasked with policing or policing, however they want to say it, policing or policing, okay? These are fundamental breakdowns. Now, acting California State Auditor Michael Tilden said in an interview, the state bar has a lot of room to improve their policies to better protect the public from attorney misconduct. Now, a team of auditors pored over the state bar's internal data and identified examples of specific lawyers with disturbing track records who received little or no discipline. That reminds me of Michael Avenatti, okay? None of the attorneys were named in the report, but they should have been, okay? But they weren't. But one was the subject of 165 complaints over 7 years. But auditors find that many of the complaints were dismissed outright or closed after the bar issued private letters to the lawyers. They issued these private letters, and no one knew what the letter said because they didn't share that information with the state bar. They just issued private letters, you know what I'm saying, to the actual attorney. So guess what? That attorney that's doing wrong is going to continue to do wrong because they know that it's not made public for them to do right. So although the volume of complaints against the attorney has increased over time, the state bar has imposed no discipline and the attorney maintains an active license. Tilden said in a letter summarizing his office findings. Another unidentified attorney had been the subject of several complaints alleging a failure to give clients money from their settlements. When the state bar finally examined the attorney's bank records, it found that the attorney had misappropriated nearly $41,000 from several clients. Tilden wrote. The chair of the state board, the chair of the state's board of trustees, Ruben Duran, said in an interview that he was troubled by the audit's findings, calling its conclusions some of the hardest hitting discoveries that the state auditor has ever made about the agency. He said the staff and leadership wanted to ensure the public was better protected and that many reforms had been implemented after the Girardi case exposed deficiencies. It shouldn't matter whether your lawyer is an A-list celebrity or a solo practitioner down the street. Everyone deserves competent, ethical, legal service, Duran said. And I agree with that. That reminds me of the R. Kelly case, where those attorneys did not seem like they were competent or they did anything ethical to help this man. And that is what's really sad about that. So he noted that the state bar went about 2 decades without fee increases and said some of the problems at the bar stem from this long-term underfunding at an agency that has to monitor more than 250,000 attorneys. Duran noted that the bar had implemented reforms that addressed some of the issues highlighted by the audit, including proposing a new program to monitor attorney trust accounts, increase oversight of the chief trial counsel's office, and twice yearly reviews of closed cases by an outside auditor. Last summer, the agency also hired George Cardona, a former federal prosecutor, to serve as chief trial counsel. But fully implementing the state auditor's recommendations will require about 30 new employees and $1 million in one-time funds, Duran said. Assembly Mark Stone, D. Scotts Valley, who is chair of the Assembly's Judiciary Committee, said the audit was profoundly eye-opening. Victims of unscrupulous lawyers should not be re-victimized by a state bar that too often has protected these lawyers from full scrutiny, Stone said in the statement. We will continue to push the bar to get back to basics and reform its discipline system once and for all. Girardi was once a top plaintiff's attorney and Democratic power broker who gained reality TV fame on Real Housewives of Beverly Hills alongside his third wife, Erica. His downfall in December 2020 was in part triggered by a judge finding that he had misappropriated millions from families of those killed in an Indonesia plane crash. But after the collapse of his Wilshire Boulevard law firm, scores of clients came forward saying they were swindled by Girardi, and the Times documented a trail of misconduct allegations going back decades. Earlier this month, a Chicago law firm accused Girardi and other lawyers at his defunct firm of running the largest criminal racketeering enterprise in the history of plaintiff's law, pocketing millions from clients, vendors, and fellow attorneys. The Girardi serial misconduct, when unchecked for decades, has forced a reckoning among the legal establishment. In addition to the State Bar's acknowledgement of past mistakes, the agency has also been conducting a broad investigation into whether its own employees or other agency insiders helped Girardi skirt scrutiny. That investigation is ongoing, Duran confirmed. Girardi is not named in Thursday's report by the state auditor, but the findings make clear that he was not alone in sidestepping sanction by the bar's disciplinary system. I think we definitely identified misconduct that does impact the average Californian if they are using the legal system, said John Klein, a principal at the auditor's office who helped lead the review. Misappropriation is a concern. That's money that should be going to clients. That's the money as absconded with. And I believe attorneys should be keeping separate accounts of settlements anyway that goes to their clients instead of taking the money and doing what they want with it for personal use, and they're not even being audited. These accounts need to be audited, and when the banks when these the banks need to actually do a better job at it as well when it's a business account, because those accounts do need to be monitored, and it's usually fees involved when you have a business account. So therefore, when they are going in there to monitor, look at your account and then take the fees out, they should be looking at some things and seeing there are some red flags there. Okay, so the audit found that the state bar failed to fully identify patterns of misconduct and investigate further, either because of its case management system or because of how it treats complaints that are withdrawn. For example, one attorney was named in multiple complaints for failing to pay settlement funds. The bar closed each after the attorney finally paid the client. But the audit states that the bar did not obtain the lawyer's bank records until it received more than 10 complaints over 2 years. And that's definitely a miscarriage of justice, because they definitely should have held this attorney accountable, because just because they come back later and pay, they should be paying on time. When these settlements come in, there is a deadline that they need to pay their clients for that money, that settlement money, and therefore no attorney should be getting away with they finally paid. You know what I mean? Because that even puts the client in more of a dire situation than what they're already in, depending on what their situation was that led them to file a lawsuit to begin with. So when the state board finally examined the client trust account, it found that the attorney had misappropriated nearly $41,000 in total from several clients, the audit states. The audit found that the state bar had also prematurely closed cases that needed further investigation or potential discipline, often through a host of confidential methods, like issuing private warning letters that I was talking about that are not knowable to the public. The public should know about those letters. So when they're choosing a client, they should have all the information they need to be able to choose an ethical lawyer. And without this information, and you choose a lawyer that's been doing criminal activity and not paying their clients, after they've won settlements, that's a problem right there. So the audit found inconsistencies in the use of non-public methods and indicated the agency had relied too much on secretive forms of discipline. Man, oh man, oh man, secretive forms of discipline, man. So from 2010 to 2021, the bar used confidential letters or warnings to attorneys twice as often as it sought public discipline. During that time frame, more than 700 attorneys had at least 4 more complaints each that were closed through private measures. The auditors reviewed the 5 attorneys' cases and found the cases were closed despite indication in its case files that further investigation or actual discipline may have been warranted. The state bar had only one outside reviewer, and that person had been the sole person examining closed cases since 2012. See, they were overstaffed. I mean, excuse me, they were understaffed. They only had one person. So that tells you something right there. They weren't really being able to do their job, effectively if it's only one person working, since, they were just closing cases. Oh, okay, oh, okay, oh, okay. That's unsatisfactory. That's unacceptable, and something should change. So the state bar staff was also selecting which cases the reviewer examined. See, they was picking and choosing. And it almost sounds like some favoritism was going on also. And I wonder if there was some quid pro quo, you do for me, I do for you, to protect me so that I can keep on practicing law and violating people's rights and violating the fact that I'm getting settlements on behalf of my clients, but I'm stealing their money and not paying these cases out, okay? And the reviewer's findings went to management, not its board of trustees. You see that? Management, not the board of trustees. which are held to even a higher standard. Okay, so anytime findings are going through management, it introduces the risk that that what is provided ultimately to the government body is altered. And I agree with that, said Klein, the principal auditor. Other errors were basic investigatory lapses like accepting poor levels of evidence. An attorney who had overdrawn a client trust account twice in a month was asked by the bar to provide bank records. Now, look what this attorney did. He turned over bank statements but left out the month when the trust account was overdrawn. And they didn't even go back and say, no, nuh-uh, we want everything, including the month where the bank was overdrawn. We need to see what was going on. See, this is the stuff they hide from the public. And this is also, it's wrong. It creates a problem and a lack of trust now for honest the attorneys that are ethical and the ones that are not, because they protect the ones that are not ethical. And this is the sad thing. And so they allowed this attorney to turn over bank statements, but leave out the month where the trust account was overdrawn. And that's what they really needed to see anyway. Is when if this account was overdrawn twice in a month, why was it overdrawn? Did this attorney take money out of the client's account, his trust account? So instead, the lawyer provided a narrative of transactions in that month. So he just probably made up some transactions is what he probably made up, and they took that. So rather than request the bank statement, the state bar accepted the lawyer's explanation and closed the case. Man, that's dirty low down. And they could have what they could have done, and I wonder if they could have done this. They could have probably gotten a subpoena to subpoena the bank record. That's what they really should have done if the attorney was uncooperative, because it sounds like the attorney was uncooperative, and they might have should have put suspended his license or something in order until he complied. You know, because this is really, really outrageous here. So Klein declined to specify what was behind the reliance on weak evidence, but said there is this focus on closing cases quickly in order to keep the backlog under control. So basically, they were trying to keep the backlog under control by picking and choosing which cases that only one employee would examine and look at or review, because they was trying to keep the cases under control, the backlog. And the fact is that they didn't bother to try to hire anybody else or reach out to the state auditor's office to let them know what was really going on. So prior audits and other officials had previously criticized the bar for a crippling backlog for cases that go 6 months without any action by the agency. And so they should have really been, but the auditor should have really been on top of that. Should have really been on top of that to make sure that they were doing things correctly, that they were doing things ethically. But they also, if you look at what they said, is that because the state bar had been criticized previously, they started taking shortcuts. And with those shortcuts, it was really hurting the clients, and attorneys were getting off. Ethical attorneys were getting off when they shouldn't have been getting off. They should have either been suspended, sanctioned, and also probably their license pulled, because something's wrong when you as a client have to seek legal services, and you don't have all the information you need to pick an attorney that's ethical, that hasn't had any violations. I mean, we have a right to decide what we want to put up with and what we don't. And when the state bar does not provide honest information for the public, that's a problem right there. A serious problem right there. Very, very serious. But anyway, you all, I know it's a long video. There's a lot of different stories I wanted to cover instead of all these separate videos. So please, please, please leave your comments below. You can always come back and finish listening to the stories. There's some pretty good stories on these videos. Joyce Watkins spending 27 years behind bars for a crime she didn't commit, her and her boyfriend, but he died in prison. Rapper Archie Eversole allegedly killed by his brother. Chris Brown, a woman hanging outside his house. An inmate that's wanting to take the firing squad. Amina muaddi says that that's just a false rumor. And there's so many other stories about a 1-year-old being pulled up, dragged by her hair, ponytail falling off, employee trying to cover it up. It's just so many different stories out here, and every day there's a lot of stuff going on. And so please, like the video, share the video, And also subscribe to the channel. If you're not a subscriber, I do appreciate each and every one of you. And again, this video is for commentary, it's for research, for education, it's for entertainment. It is to talk about things and critique what is going on in the news. So thank you so much. God bless you all on today.